The courtroom lights were bright, but the air felt heavy. Cameras hummed quietly along the walls, broadcasting every breath, every word. Every glance to a national audience hungry for drama. Millions were watching, some from phones in subway cars, some from cable news feeds in restaurants, and many in silence from their homes. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was theater. Real power theater. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood slowly from her seat. There were no notes in her hand, no legal papers, no script. Just her voice. And it didn't shake. Across the room sat Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida. She was polished, calm, and surrounded by expensive lawyers in dark suits. Her expression said she was ready. She had done this before. She wasn't worried yet. The judge looked over the courtroom, gave a small nod, and said, "Congresswoman Crockett, you may proceed." Jasmine stepped forward. "I didn't come here today to destroy someone's reputation," she began. "Came here to do what the people sent me here to do, tell the truth, even when it's ugly." There was a slight shuffle of papers from Bondi's team. Someone coughed in the back. The reporters leaned forward. "For years," Jasmine continued, "Pam Bondi has been praised as a fighter for justice. She built her name on being tough on crime and standing up to corruption. That was her public image." She paused. Her eyes locked directly on Bondi's. But behind that image was a hidden story, one that deserves to be told. Now the room had truly quieted in 2011 while serving as Florida's Attorney General. Jasmine said Ms. Bond led a public campaign against illegal pill mills. It was loud, it was flashy, and yes, it looked like justice. But at the same time, her office made a quiet decision. They refused to prosecute a pharmaceutical lobbying firm that had been under investigation for mislabeling drug data and pushing opioids into poor communities. Pam Bondi raised her chin slightly, but said nothing. Just weeks before that case was dropped, Jasmine continued. That same firm donated $25,000 to Ms. Bondi's campaign fund. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised her hand for silence. "You want to call that a coincidence?" Jasmine asked, looking at the jury. "Or do we call it what it really is, corruption, hiding in plain sight?" One of Bondi's lawyers stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation." The judge looked down, unsure. Sustained. "Proceed carefully, Congresswoman." Jasmine didn't flinch. "I understand," she said, then turned to face the room again. "Let me be careful. Then, I have the records of that donation. I have internal emails from whistleblowers inside the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And I have voice recordings of investigators being told to back off just days before the case was closed. Gasps, real ones. Not just from the gallery, but even from the media table." Pam Bondi leaned toward her lawyer and whispered fast. Attorney grabbed a notepad and started scribbling. "I've waited years to say this," Jasmine said, her voice quiet but strong, "because too many people lost their lives to addiction. Too many families buried loved ones. And while they were suffering, someone was protecting donors, not victims." A reporter from the New York Times dropped her pen. A Fox News analyst turned to his producer. The story was writing itself. The headlines were already forming. "Congresswoman drops bomb on Bondi during live court showdown." Jasmine Crockett exposes hidden chapter in Florida opioid scandal. In the hallway outside, a protester watching the live feed on his phone covered his mouth in disbelief. Inside, Bondi finally stood. "Your Honor, this is a political ambush. This entire hearing has turned into a circus." The judge looked directly at her. "If this is untrue, you'll have your chance to respond under oath. For now, sit down," Bondi sought slowly. Her confidence was fading. Jasmine turned back to the jury. "This isn't just about a donation. It's about how the system protects itself. How someone can appear to serve justice while quietly choosing who gets justice and who doesn't. And today, I'm here to say, that ends now." The silence that followed wasn't empty. was full of weight, full of disbelief. Full of the kind of quiet that happens when truth crashes through a door no one thought would open. Even the judge leaned back slightly, unsure how to proceed. The court clerk looked at the feed monitor. Oh, 6 million people were watching the live stream. 6 million people who had just witnessed the fall of a carefully built image outside the building. News vans fired up engines. Inside TV studios across the country, producers scrambled to update their segment rundowns. The story had changed. Everything had changed. Pam Bondi sat frozen. Jasmine Crockett did not smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply walked back to her seat because she knew this wasn't over. It had only just begun. The news broke like a flood. By the time Jasmine Crockett returned to her office that evening, the clip of her courtroom confrontation had been shared over 10 million times. News anchors struggled to keep up. Some called it a political assassination, others a historic act of accountability. Cable panels erupted. Hashtags trended worldwide. And in the middle of it all stood two names, Jasmine Crockett and Pam Bondi, at the Ledger. A small but fiercely independent news outlet known for digging where others wouldn't. Senior investigative journalist Lena Brooks watched the clip again, her jaw tightening. She had covered the 2011 Florida pharma scandal. At the time, she remembered strange delays, vague denials, and a sudden drop in the state's investigation. But no one had the full picture. Until now. She turned to her junior researcher. Get me everything we buried on that case, now. Across town, in a high-rise office with tinted windows, Pam Bondi met with her crisis team. There were 8 people in the room. Lawyers, PR specialists, and 2 political fixers. No one was calm. You need to deny everything, one of the lawyers said. Tack the source. Question her motives. Make this about politics, not facts. Bondi said nothing for a moment. Her jaw clenched. Do we know where Crockett got the recordings? No, but if they're real, someone from inside the state leaked them. Bondi looked out the window. Find out who. That night, Jasmine was back at her apartment alone. The lights from the city glowed through her window, but she didn't feel the weight of victory. She felt the weight of danger. Her phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. Nice performance today. Be careful whose doors you open. She stared at it, calm. She had expected this, maybe even worse. The next morning, the Ledger published an article titled "The Case That Vanished: How Florida's Ag Let Big Pharma Walk." It included details from an unpublished 2011 report obtained through a forgotten FUJA request. Names were named. Dates were given. The donation timeline matched perfectly with the closure of the case. It was more than a coincidence. It was a pattern. Now international media picked it up. The BBC, Der Spiegel, Al Jazeera, and Le Monde all ran versions of the story. And they asked deeper questions. Was this isolated? Or was the U.S. justice system hiding more cases like this? By noon, the White House press secretary was fielding questions from every major reporter. We're not commenting on ongoing legal matters, she said. But President Hale believes in transparency and accountability across all levels of government. Translation: the administration was watching very, very closely. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, 3 senior congressmen approached Jasmine's office. They weren't allies. There were powerful figures who saw what she had done. Nan didn't like the precedent. One of them, a polished veteran named Senator Drayton, stepped inside. That was quite the scene yesterday, he said with a tight smile. Jasmine didn't smile back. Truth has a way of making a scene. He chuckled softly. Don't get too comfortable. The people you're challenging, they don't just walk away. She held his gaze. Neither do I. Down in Florida, a former state investigator named Marcus Heller watched Jasmine's hearing on repeat. His hands trembled. He had been there in 2011. He remembered the order to stop digging. He remembered how his supervisor told him to back off quietly or find another job. He never forgot. Now, someone was finally speaking out. That night, he sent an email to Jasmine Crockett, with a subject line that simply read, "I was there and I'm ready to talk." Inside the message were two files, a memo he wrote back then and a voicemail saved from the day before the case was dropped. The voice in the message was clear, calm, familiar. "Pam Bondi's deputy. We're shutting this down. Orders came from the top. File it and forget it." The puzzle was becoming clearer. But Jasmine knew that every step forward would bring more danger. She wasn't just fighting an old scandal. She was threatening the system that allowed it to happen. And that system had no intention of letting her walk away clean. The next day, her team found surveillance footage from their office security camera. A man in a black coat had tried the door handle at midnight. He left nothing behind. But it wasn't random. Jasmine stared at the screen. "It's starting," she said. Her aide looked at her nervously. "Starting?" Jasmine nodded. "They think this is about Bondi. They're wrong. This is about everything she represents." And for the first time, she felt it, not fear, not pride, but the cold weight of what she had just begun. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was war. The news cycle had not moved on. Kay couldn't. 3 days after Jasmine Crockett's courtroom explosion, the story was still dominating headlines. It was bigger than Pam Bondi now. It was about trust in government, about who had power and how. They kept it. People were angry, curious, and scared. The public had questions, and the institutions they once believed in had gone silent. Inside a small Washington, D.C. newsroom, journalist Lena Brooks was piecing together something much larger. She had been working overnight with her team at the Ledger, connecting files. From the 2011 case with campaign finance reports, internal emails, and old interview transcripts. What if this wasn't just about that one pharmaceutical firm? Her researcher asked, eyes scanning spreadsheets. Lena leaned forward. What if it's a network, a blueprint used in other states? Her names. They stared at each other. Then she opened a secure drive labeled Dormant Leads 2011 to 2014. Inside were 3 folders. One name stood out. Meditech Partners, Ohio. Lena's pulse quickened. Get me everything we have on that. And cross-check Bondi's consulting jobs after 2014. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a BBC World News anchor in a sterile white studio. The interview was live, translated into multiple languages and broadcast globally. The host, calm and precise, asked the question everyone else was afraid to. Congresswoman Crockett, are you accusing a former state attorney general of obstruction of justice? Jasmine didn't blink. I'm not accusing her. I'm proving it. The anchor raised an eyebrow. What does that mean for your own safety? Jasmine took a breath. I've already received threats. But this isn't about me. This is about what happens when public servants become servants to donors, not citizens. What I exposed in that courtroom is just the beginning. Think people deserve the truth, whether it's ugly or not. Across the world, in Brussels, an investigative unit within the European Parliament had begun reviewing contracts and lobbying. Data connected to American pharmaceutical companies operating in the EU. Jasmine's courtroom. Bombshell had triggered a domino effect. If influence had corrupted one investigation in Florida, how many others had been buried across the Atlantic? European lawmakers began to whisper. Could this become an international scandal? Back in Florida, Marcus Heller, once a forgotten state investigator, was preparing to go public. He had agreed to speak in a live interview on 60 Minutes. It would be recorded in a secure location, with a legal team reviewing every word. He had nothing to gain. But after years of guilt, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He sent Jasmine a message. The interview will air Sunday. You're right. The silence is a lie. Jasmine responded with just one line. You're brave, and we're not alone anymore. But the moment brought new risks. On Capitol Hill, an emergency meeting was held behind closed doors. Senior members of both parties gathered not to address the scandal, but to control its damage. They weren't trying to stop corruption. They were trying to stop the story. One senator, grim-faced and calculating, said it aloud, "If this turns into a bipartisan accountability push, the donors walk away. If the donors walk, we lose elections." Another whispered, "She's not playing the game. She's trying to burn the board." The decision was made. Target her. Discredit her. Not with facts, but with doubt. That night, news leaked about an ethics inquiry into Jasmine's campaign spending. It was flimsy, based on anonymous tips. But it was enough to flood the headlines with something else. Cable hosts asked, "Can we trust someone who's under review herself?" On social media, bots and trolls swarmed her pages with doubt. But Jasmine knew this was coming. She had told her team weeks ago, "The moment we tell the truth, the machine will come for us. I'll let it know." Instead of hiding, she scheduled another public statement the next morning outside the Capitol steps. With cameras pointed and reporters packed tightly, she addressed the nation. "I told you this wasn't about one woman. And I told you they'd try to shift the story. I will answer every question about my campaign spending. But don't let that distract you from what I revealed. Evidence of a state-level cover-up that affected lives, that destroyed families, that protected money instead of people. If telling that truth makes me a target, so be it." The press erupted with questions, but Jasmine walked away. She had said enough for now, far away, in a dimly lit office in New York. A former federal prosecutor named Daniel Ruiz watched the clip in silence. His career had ended after clashing with the same lobbying groups, now in the news. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old sealed envelope. On it were the initials PB and a date, May 14th, 2011. He held it for a moment, then whispered, "Maybe it's finally time." And somewhere deep in a server, a file named meditech_email_dumpzip began uploading to an encrypted address. Linked to the ledger, the storm was growing, and Jasmine wasn't the only one stirring it. The interview with Marcus Heller aired on a cold Sunday evening. 60 Minutes didn't soften it. No music, no dramatization. Just Marcus, sitting in a gray room, eyes steady, voice calm. He wore a plain blue shirt and no tie. There were dark circles under his eyes, but his words were clear. "I was told to shut down the investigation," he said. The exact phrase used was, "Don't make enemies above your pay grade." The case involved a pharmaceutical lobbying for Mies, the same one that donated to Pam Bondi's campaign. The evidence we had was strong, but it didn't matter. The orders came from the top, and that top was her. When the episode ended, phones lit up across the country. Viewers tweeted clips with captions like, "This is bigger than we thought, and this isn't politics. This is betrayal." The next morning, the Department of Justice issued a brief, vague statement. "We are reviewing newly surfaced materials related to a 2011 Florida case." No names were mentioned, but everyone knew what it meant. The silence from Florida's political class said even more. Inside Bondi's team, chaos had fully bloomed. "She's pulling witnesses out of the past like ghosts," one aide said. "She's not just pulling them," Bondi snapped. "She's lighting a match under every weak spot we ever had." Her lawyers were divided. Some wanted to sue for defamation. Others warned that would only open more doors. In D.C., the political establishment was crumbling into factions. Some quietly supported Jasmine, sensing the tide turning. Others wanted her out fast, but she was gaining a kind of momentum that couldn't be stopped by press releases, especially now that another story had broken. The Ledger had published the full Meditech document leak. Emails, contracts, invoices. One message stood out. "Pam wants this closed before it causes noise." She handled the campaign side. Was dated 2 weeks before the $25,000 donation and the case dismissal. The fallout was instant. CNN ran a special, Pam Bondi Law or Loyalty. MSNBC's lead anchor called it the clearest case of political favoritism since the Watergate era. Even conservative media split. Some defended Bondi, others distanced themselves. At the White House, President Hale was briefed by intelligence and legal teams. He stared at the screen showing Jasmine's last public statement and asked one question. Do we think she has more? No one had an answer. That night, Jasmine received a package at her apartment. No label, just a flash drive inside a black envelope. It contained two things: a video, a single typed sentence. This was never just about Florida. She called her chief of staff, get Lena Brooks from the Ledger. We need to authenticate this. They met in a secured office inside a downtown building. Lena watched the video once, then again. It was a recording from 2014 off-the-record conversation between Bondi and three unidentified men. One voice said, "We've secured immunity for Florida. But if this spreads, we'll have problems in Ohio and Pennsylvania." Bondi replied, "Keep it buried. If it surfaces, we burn." Lena looked up, stunned. She's not just protecting herself, she's protecting a network. Jasmine's voice was steady. "I think we just found the next target." Later that week in Brussels, the European Parliament Committee launched a formal investigation into American pharmaceutical lobbying. Groups operating overseas. Pressure from international allies mounted. Public health NGOs called for full transparency. What began as a state-level scandal was now global. Meanwhile, Jasmine's life had changed. Security followed her everywhere. Her apartment was swept twice a day. Her staff rotated in pairs. The threats had increased not just online but in coded messages, strange phone calls, and one broken window. But she didn't stop. She held a private meeting with whistleblower advocacy groups. She connected with victims' families from states where similar pharma donations had occurred. She built a coalition not of politicians, but of citizens. Lawyers, ex-investigators, and journalists. And then she did something no one expected. She filed a motion in federal court requesting that her committee be granted authority to subpoena communications between Meditech and state governments in 4 states: Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. The motion was aggressive and dangerous. Sent a clear message. This isn't a story, it's a case, and it's growing. Pam Bondi appeared on a conservative news channel that night. Her voice was calm, but her eyes flickered. "This is a political smear," she said. "Jasmine Crockett is creating a circus. There is no truth behind these accusations. Just ambition." But her words lacked weight now. The silence in the host's face said it all. The next morning, Jasmine received a message from an unknown number. Not a threat this time, just coordinates. A location in Pennsylvania, a public records building, a date, a time. Her aide looked at her nervously. "Do you think it's real?" Jasmine closed her phone. "Only one way to find out." And as she stepped out into the cold morning light, she knew one thing. She had cracked the door. Now she was walking straight through it. The public records office in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania was old, worn down, mostly forgotten, just the kind of place where secrets like to sleep. Jasmine Crockett arrived quietly. No motorcade, no press. Just her, a staffer named Deshawn, and 2 federal marshals assigned for her safety. Inside the hallways smelled of paper, dust, and time. The air was cold. They followed the coordinates exactly. Down one hall, then another. Finally, they found it, room 309. A door marked Inactive Archives, Vault C. It was unlocked. Inside, a box sat on the center table. No label, no seal. Just a folded note on top. This one never made it to Tallahassee. Jasmine opened the box slowly. Inside were files, lots of them. Hard copies, faded receipts, campaign disclosures, pharmaceutical shipment invoices, and 2 hard drives. Everything was organized by date, all pointing to one thing: a second, quieter campaign donation scheme in 2014. A company named Wellbright Solutions had funneled over $200,000 to PACs connected to Bondi's inner circle. In return, delayed investigations. In 2 cases, sudden closures. The evidence wasn't just strong, it was direct. There were names, dates, payments. One handwritten memo read, "PB will handle it with the governor. Just keep Jacksonville quiet." Jasmine whispered, "They moved this across state lines." Her phone buzzed. It was Lena Brooks from the Ledger. "I've confirmed it," she said quickly. "Wellbright Solutions is a shadow firm for Meditech. They've used that name to hide political donations in 4 states. This isn't about policy. It's a laundering scheme for influence." Jasmine stepped out of the archive room, heart pounding. "They knew this would surface," she said. "They just didn't expect someone to connect the dots." The next day, Jasmine released a statement. It wasn't just a press release, it was a trigger. "Today, I am requesting a full federal investigation into multi-state coordination between pharmaceutical lobbying groups and former public officials, including Pam Bondi. The documents we found point to a pattern of cover-ups and deliberate obstruction. It's no longer a question of politics, it is a matter of justice." That afternoon, the Washington Post ran the headline, "Crockett uncovers second network Bondi tied to coordinated cover-up in response." The Department of Justice officially opened a special inquiry. Bondi didn't appear on television that night. Instead, a closed-door meeting took place in Palm Beach between Bondi and 2 powerful donors, one of them a former cabinet secretary. The message was blunt. "We can't protect you if you don't stop the bleeding." But it was already too late, because the Meditech whistleblower whose identity had been hidden was preparing to come forward. His name was Dr. Aaron Castillo, a former compliance officer. And he had more than testimony. He had recordings. Jasmine and Lena met him in a secure location backed by pro bono attorneys and federal witnesses program officials. He sat across from them, pale but focused. "There's something you don't know," he began. Wellbright wasn't just about funding politicians. They were about shaping legislation. In 2013, they wrote entire sections of a bill that Bondi pushed into state law. Lena blinked. "She let a lobbying firm write the law." Aaron nodded. "I still have the drafts. With tracked edits, their logo is in the footer." Jasmine looked at the document and felt a chill. This wasn't corruption, she said slowly. It was policy laundering. Back in D.C., the pressure exploded. Public outcry reached the Capitol. Protesters held signs reading "Justice is not for sale," and Big Pharma bought the law. Cable shows turned into war rooms. Half the country praised Jasmine as a hero. The other half called it a witch hunt. But one thing was certain, no one could ignore her now. Bondi, cornered, finally agreed to a live interview, a primetime special. The promo ran all day. Pam Bondi breaks her silence tonight at 8 p.m. Live. Jasmine didn't blink. She knew what was coming. At 8 p.m. sharp, millions tuned in. Bondi sat across from the host, posture tight, smile forced. "I've done nothing wrong," she said. "These accusations are designed to destroy my career and reputation." But the host interrupted. "Then how do you explain these?" He held up the memo, the email logs, the tracked changes in legislation drafts. Bondi faltered. That's not mine. I don't recall." The host cut in again, then listened to this. They played a clip, Bondi's voice. "Get the edits in by Monday. They'll never trace it back to Wellbright." Silence. Not just in the studio. Everywhere. The country froze. People stared at their screens, jaws open, Bondi's face turned pale. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett didn't need to say anything. The truth had spoken for itself. But for Jasmine, this wasn't victory. Not yet. Because now that the system had been cracked open, someone would try to close it again. And the next move would be the most dangerous yet. the morning after Pam Bondi's televised collapse. Washington wasn't just shaken, it was trembling. Every major news outlet had looped the clip of her voice. They'll never trace it back to Wellbright again and again with analysts, dissecting every second like a national security crisis. Bondi's legal team went dark. Her PR firm resigned. Quietly, multiple former staffers started deleting old social media posts and wiping connections to her. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't celebrating. She sat in a private briefing room, surrounded by federal agents, cybersecurity analysts, and a growing pile of sealed evidence. Her team had worked non-stop. They knew one thing: Bondi wasn't the end of the road. She was a gatekeeper. The real architects of the scheme were still hidden and still watching. At the center of the table was the newest file from Lena Brooks. It contained 3 key revelations. Wellbright Solutions had created at least 6 shell companies across the U.S. Those companies had been listed as policy consultants for state-level politicians. One of those shell companies had received a direct transfer from a foreign investment group tied to Eastern European pharmaceutical markets. Jasmine stared at the map. "This isn't just a domestic corruption case," she said. "This is international. Laundering." Her aide Deshawn shook his head. "Which means if we push further, we're crossing diplomatic lines." Lena added, "We might already have." At that moment, Jasmine's phone buzzed. An encrypted message from a secure federal address flashed on screen. Confirmed. Several of the shell companies were receiving offshore funds from a firm headquartered in Cyprus, traced to registered lobbyist meetings at EU health summits. Unmarked donors suspected cross-border pharmaceutical influence. "You're now entering intagency review territory." She read it twice. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was geopolitical in Brussels. The European Parliament convened an emergency session on foreign influence and global healthcare policy. The chair cited Jasmine's investigation by name. European lawmakers demanded U.S. cooperation in an independent review. Leaks began to spill mails between American pharma executives and EU negotiators, going the same pattern seen in Bondi's case. But back in the U.S., the political machine began to fight back harder. Late that night, a new scandal broke. A major outlet published an anonymous leak accusing Jasmine of meeting with hostile foreign nationals. During a fundraiser in 2022, the story lacked evidence but was designed to raise suspicion. Cable pundits seized on it, trying to muddy the waters. Jasmine held a press conference the next morning, eyes clear, voice unwavering. "Let me be very clear," she said. "I have never taken money from foreign donors. And I have never met with foreign operatives I've exposed who hid behind shell companies and PACs. If anyone wants to investigate me, they can. My record is clean." And that's exactly why they're afraid. It was a direct challenge. It worked. Several prominent senators came to her defense, including some who had previously stayed silent. But something else happened that morning. Quiet, subtle, and deadly serious. Deshawn was reviewing Jasmine's car when he found a small, magnetized device under the rear wheel well. It wasn't a bomb, but it was a tracker. They reported it to Homeland Security. By that evening, surveillance footage revealed an unmarked car pulling into Jasmine's garage late the previous night. The driver wore a cap, never looked up, and left within minutes. When Jasmine saw the footage, she said nothing. She simply whispered, "They're watching my moves. That means we're getting close." Later that night, in a private conversation with Lena, she admitted something no one else knew. "I've been followed twice, once in New York, once near my apartment. Same black SUV. No plates, no lights." Lena's eyes widened. "Why haven't you said anything?" Jasmine sighed. "Because if I say it, I have to pull back, and I can't." "Not yet." Lena nodded. "Then we need to release what we have now, before they shut us down." So the next morning, the Ledger dropped the biggest piece yet. A Full map of the political pharmaceutical influence network. It included 22 lawmakers, 4 corporate boards, and one name that shocked everyone, a current presidential candidate. Within minutes, the Department of Justice announced it would launch a joint task force with international investigators. A UN oversight committee issued a statement of concern. Financial records were frozen in 5 countries. The SEC and FBI expanded their scope. The entire system began to rattle inside Capitol Hill. Some senators whispered of hearings. Others spoke of resignations. But one veteran senator, grim and calculating, said what many feared. If this gets bigger, we're going to see arrests, not just staffers, real names, people with power. That night, as Jasmine sat alone, her phone buzzed. Again, another encrypted message. No text. Just a photo, a grainy surveillance image. It was Jasmine. In her apartment lobby, from 2 nights ago, taken from inside the building. Her breath caught. She wasn't just being watched from the outside. They were already inside, and the final move was coming. The rain hit Washington hard that morning, painting the streets in streaks of gray and steel. Jasmine Crockett watched it from her window, her reflection faint in the glass. She hadn't slept much. The photograph, the one sent to her phone, was still burned into her mind. Someone had been inside, not just watching, hiding, listening. Her security team swept the apartment at sunrise. They found a pin-sized microphone embedded inside the smoke detector. Professional-grade military spec. They knew your schedule, your calls. Maybe even what you said off record, the lead agent told her. Jasmine didn't flinch. Then, let's give them something to hear. By 9 a.m., she was on the floor of the Capitol. Her final motion in hand, a formal request for a congressional oversight. Commissioned to investigate not only the Medekbandi network, but every political PAC that had received donations from Wellbright or its shell company since 2010. Some members froze. Others walked out, but a dozen stood and joined her. In the press gallery, cameras snapped nonstop. Journalists whispered to each other. The stakes had changed. This wasn't about holding one person accountable. It was about exposing how deep the rot had grown across administrations, across parties, across borders. An hour later, news broke from Brussels. European regulators had issued warrants for executives tied to the Cyprus-based fund behind Wellbright. 5 top officials had resigned within the first hour. More were expected. International pressure mounted. Then, just as the news cycle hit a fever pitch, a man walked into a federal building in Miami. He wore a simple suit and carried a sealed folder. His name was Nathan Marlowe, former chief counsel for the Pharmaceutical Lobbying Association. That had funded the entire web. His statement was brief, shocking. I have documents, recordings, and payment logs. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was standard strategy. Target key officials, fund their rise, kill investigations. Influence policy from the inside. The folder contained everything. Jasmine received the confirmation that afternoon. Her aides passed her a USB drive marked with DOJ evidence tags. Her hands shook for the first time in days. Inside were 3 names she didn't expect: senior figures in the Department of Health, 2 state governors, and 1 retired federal judge, all of them tied to a system of legalized corruption that had touched millions of lives. Deshawn leaned in. You sure you want to go public with this? Jasmine stared at the screen. If I don't, they win. Again. She scheduled a press conference for 7 p.m., but just before she left, another alert hit. A fire in a government archive facility in Phoenix, Arizona. One of the sites connected to Wellbright's secondary storage. It had been wiped out. No survivors. No backup records. Jasmine's throat tightened. They're cleaning house. She turned to her staff. Tell every ally to secure everything. Share it. Scatter it. They want to bury it, we make it impossible. By the time she stepped onto the stage that evening, the Capitol steps were lined with reporters, citizens, and protesters. Rain fell gently, but the energy was electric. People were scared but ready. She spoke slowly, clearly. I didn't ask for this fight, but I couldn't walk away from it either. What started with one name, Pam Bondi, was never just about her. It was about a system built to protect power and punish truth. But now we know, and knowing changes everything. She held up the drive. This is what they tried to erase. But here it is. Alive, documented, and undeniable. Applause erupted not loud, but solid. Defiant, and then silence. She looked into the cameras. To the people still trying to stop us, I have only one message. It's too late. The walls are closing in, not on the whistleblowers, not on the journalists, on you. Across the country, families watched from dinner tables, subway screens, phones, and hospital waiting rooms. And in living rooms once filled with political apathy, something stirred. A sense that the truth had finally cut through the noise. Back in her office, Jasmine sat quietly, exhausted but unbroken. Lena called. "You did it," she said. Jasmine shook her head. "We opened the door. Now we have to walk through it." And somewhere on a quiet beach in Florida, figure watched the press conference alone. Pam Bondi, face pale, glass of wine untouched. Behind her, a duffel bag. Sat half-sipped. Inside, passports, cash, and a burner phone. She turned off the TV. The era of silence was over, and the reckoning had just begun.